This is the Common Health Podcast, a product of the CSIS Bipartisan Alliance for Global Health Security. We engage with diverse leaders on the question of how best to navigate this period of exceptional turmoil, reform, and uncertainty in U.S. leadership. We are aided throughout by our able producer, Marla Hiller. I'm delighted today to be joined by Katelyn Jetelina, the founder and lead of your Local Epidemiologist, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. Welcome, Katelyn, and thanks so much for making time to be with us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Dr. Jetelina is a PhD in epidemiology and biostatistics from the University of Texas at the Houston Sciences Center. She started her career there looking at violence and injury. Prior to that, she had received a master's degree in public health at the same University Health Sciences Center. She founded your Local Epidemiologist in March of 2020 as the pandemic was just beginning, which has mushroomed into now at the 5th year anniversary, congratulations, of that, into quite an enterprise. And we'll talk a bit about this. This is a very inspiring, actually, story, I think, for many of us. I think I am among many people who benefited from your insights over the course of COVID and beyond. I was one of those people, Joe on a corner, you've talked about, where I was looking for you to break down the complicated, fast-breaking science so that I could have an informed personal decision, which was I know you've talked about this before, but I just want to say at the outset how grateful I am for what you've created and for the companion that you created during that period of crisis, and my amazement also that you've carried it forward post-COVID and sustained and built it out. Katelyn is an epidemiologist, a data scientist, a social entrepreneur. You're also an adjunct professor at Yale School of Public Health as of June of last year, a senior scientific advisor to CDC and to Resolve to Save Lives dating back to 2022, I believe, if that's correct. She's based in San Diego, where she lives with her 2 daughters and her husband. Prior to all of this happening, you also worked for WHO in Geneva, worked in South Africa, and ran a research lab at the University of Texas. A remarkable background. So thank you for making time. Let's start at this 5th anniversary of your Local Epidemiologist. Tell us a little bit, as you reflect back now at this 5-year mark, around the origin and the purpose and mission, how you got this started, because my guess is that, like many things in COVID, you just started it and you didn't know where it was going to go, and so getting your perspective now would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, the past 5 years has been this incredibly wild ride. I will say that. But you're right. In March of 2020, even before that, I'm an epidemiologist. I was following this thing called COVID-19 that was starting to emerge over in Wuhan and then went to Iran and Italy, very closely following it. And actually, my dean came to me and was like, Katelyn, I know you love to teach students. Can you just write a daily email to faculty, staff, and students about what you're paying attention to, what you're doing as a family, basically what the heck is going on, because there's so much confusion. And so that original email started with about 30 faculty and staff. It wasn't big. And I called them your daily data-driven updates. And it was very ugly Excel graphs, but me walking people through and bringing people along for the science discovery ride. And I signed those emails, "Love, Your Local Epidemiologist," because that's who I was to them. And then a few days later, one of my students came to me and asked if I could start putting it on social media so she could start sharing it with her family and friends, these updates.
Yes.
I distinctly remember telling my husband, I was like, what the hell? Only have to do this for about 6 weeks max. And then surely someone's going to pick up the baton and start explaining to people in understandable real-time terms what the heck is going on. And that didn't happen. And so social media started to just blow up. 5 years later, I have this newsletter and it's reached over 500 million people in 133 countries. And you're right. I mean, I first obviously focused on COVID for a solid 3-4 years. And then I was really curious to see if I could explain to people and not even explain, show people how public health goes beyond a pandemic and beyond infectious diseases. And so that's been the great experiment since.
Well, congratulations. I mean, your regular listenership or regular audience today is something on the order of 350,000 people. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the newsletters, 300, well, there's about 370,000 now email addresses. And then social media accounts reach about 700,000. So it's pretty incredible reach, if I should say so myself, for an epidemiologist.
And tell us about the upside and the downside of this. You went through COVID when there was a lot of backlash and a lot of anger vented in all directions. To what degree were you targeted at different times?
Yeah, so I think context is really important. I was in the South when all this was happening. I was helping with the Texas responses. So I wasn't even just writing about it. I was on the front line, particularly at the Houston response. And you're right. The first couple months, everyone was cheering. Everyone was, you're a hero. And then that turned very quickly into this political and ideological battle. And a lot of people, including myself on the front line and in these public spaces, got the brunt of it. And I was doxxed, I was hacked, packages were sent to my university. People showed up at the house. We went through the death threats. We went through everything. And I'm still getting some of that right now. I think it's just part of this gig and figuring out how to manage it and how to build a really strong, tough skin has been one of the lessons I've learned.
So tough skin is part of this. Have you been able to bridge the divides in our society in this period? When you look at the 370,000 or the 700,000, do you think you've been able to cross the divide and get people to listen and carefully and have an open mind to the type of fact-based and tell it like it is sort of approach that you bring?
I sure aim to be that sort of voice that is bridging the two. I ask a survey of all my readers every year, and I ask political and fiscal and social viewpoints, and it is across the spectrum. I think a lot of that is because this was born in the South in Texas. There's a very large Texas base. But it's left leaning. I don't know if anyone's surprised about that. But my goal has been to build that bridge to be stronger. One way of doing that is I'm trying to listen a whole lot more than I was in the first year or two of the pandemic. I am being very selective on how I talk about things from an empathetic voice, even down to words I use. For example, I won't use the word misinformation in my newsletter because it's a trigger word for a lot of people. So, I'm learning as we go, right? I think part of this was I never got 1 hour of one course of communication during my master's or PhD. So I've very much been learning as we go. And I think that's all we can really do.
Now, it looks to me as if you've built something that is a new phenomenon. You're mixing your written Substack dailies, you're appearing in podcasts, you're appearing in video work. Say a bit about that. As you've evolved, you've diversified. Are you also doing speaking engagements? How does this evolve? As I've watched what's happened, it reminds me of the Bulwark. It reminds me of how they've innovated, and there's crossover. You show up periodically there too. But tell me a bit about how your own thinking about media and communications has changed in this period when we've seen these new forms take off. Podcasting's taken off, but also these multimedia packages.
Yeah, it is. It has turned into a media or social enterprise. I think social media is a really important aspect of mine. I'll be honest, there's no really ROI with social media, but that is where people are at. 1 in 2 Americans get their health information on social media. And so I have tried to very much push even more of a presence on social media, try to meet the needs and listen, doing a lot of social listening. You're right, I co-host a podcast now called America Dissected. I have this newsletter, and more importantly, I have a team. So the first 4 years, I was a one-woman show, and that was not sustainable. I'll just tell you that right now. And now I have an incredible team of 15. And I'm trying to elevate their voices, right? I don't have to be, and I shouldn't be the only voice out there, and try to make a new pathway for public health communications for people to adapt and learn from. And so yeah, I'm kind of all over. And you're right. I mean, some of it's mass media as well as speaking engagements. I mean, I probably do 4 speaking engagements a month. And I see that as an education opportunity, a way to give forward, because I love teaching. And we need to do things differently. I mean, I think that is very clear in this day and age that our old systems, our old way of thinking is just not how it's going to get things done.
So say a bit more about that. You've been at times quite critical of what you've described as traditional science. You've also commented on the need for different mode of communications in order not to trigger suspicion or reaction or rejection, in order to reach a population that's increasingly very skeptical of public health and of science and of authority. You've got to thread a needle in a different way than the past. Say a bit about that.
That's right. So our traditional models of information diffusion has been a trickle down from the ivory towers, and that is just not reaching every household that it needs to reach for many different reasons: access, mistrust in institutions, et cetera. And so we really need to flip that model around. And the way that I'm envisioning it is, sure, you're still going to have that trickle down from the ivory towers, but we need to be laser focused on equipping trusted messengers in communities and on social media. Trusted messengers being physicians or librarians or pharmacists or pastors, or really anyone that these communities look for, because they've already have that community trust. And there's a better approach than, Dr. Katelyn Jetelina on PBS NewsHour or parachuting in with a clipboard. No one's going to trust me, and they shouldn't. And so my focus for my readership on my newsletter, as well as I also have a nonprofit arm, is to figure out how to scale equipping trusted messengers with the information they need to be responsive and helpful for their community.
Is this something that you're bringing to the classroom? I mean, as you teach whether it's at Yale School of Public Health or wherever, are you pushing for changes in curriculum? Are you pushing for a new approach in which those students coming into the field are really focused on how to make sure you are able to reach all facets of society and win their trust and open-mindedness?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I was ecstatic to join Megan Rainey at Yale School of Public Health, is because she's also thinking very differently, that communication and engagement has to be a core pillar in public health that it's really never been before. And that's kind of embarrassing to say, but we've always, at least in my training and even when I was faculty, the traditional model is scientists learning how to speak to other scientists through conferences and peer-reviewed articles, and never learning how to write op-eds, how to engage on social media, how to do social listening, how to do all of these tools we need in our toolbox to be a whole lot more effective as public health servants. And so we've developed a course, and I'll be teaching it at Yale next spring. And so I hope that more and more schools of public health are either partnering with schools of communication, which there are, or other scientific communicators to think very differently for the next generations.
Thank you. I visited with Dean Megan Rainey at Yale in early February. I spent a day up there, and I was super impressed with her leadership, the new strategic plan, the spirit in the classroom, the exceptional quality of the graduate students and the undergraduates. It was really quite inspiring. Let me ask you about the current moment. I naively thought that the more time we put between ourselves and the worst of COVID, that things would begin to cool, that some of the anger, some of the frustration would begin to cool. But what we've seen now is quite the opposite. We seem to have entered a new big moment for public health and science and the entire sort of research and development enterprise for science. We're 60 days now into the second Trump term, and it feels like COVID rebound. It feels like there's been an uptick here in this sense of vengeance and retribution in the air, of the need to reckon for perceived mistakes and abuses alleged to have been committed during COVID. And it seems to animate a lot of the policy environment and the appointments and the rhetoric when we look at the nomination and the confirmation process for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of HHS, for Jay Bhattacharya as the nominee to head the National Institutes of Health, for Marty Makary, nominated to head FDA, and of course, the election of President Trump himself. There's been this sense that the mission here is to go back in the past to correct these mistakes. And I think that's come across in an alarming way. And I just wanted to get your reflections on this.
Yeah, I mean, this sense of vengeance and retribution is real, right? So we see it in the efforts to dismantle public health infrastructure. We are seeing defunding of key programs, sidelining of scientific institutions. And the pandemic response has become this proxy war for deeper ideological battles, right? About government authority, personal freedoms, and even what constitutes the truth. And this is incredibly challenging for public health because we're seeing this rise in individualism, and public health is this collective good. And public health makes the assumption that everyone is keen on protecting those in their community. And the DNA is kind of getting unraveled right now. And so I think you're completely right. There was no doubt there was mistakes made during COVID, but there was also a lot of positives during COVID as well. And I think the biggest thing I have been concerned about, I was just on Ezra Klein talking about this, is pandemic revisionism and being in the comfort of immunity and rewriting history and the implications that has, not only today, but for decades from now.
So is there a path? Do we need to intensify our thinking now about finding some path that will move us beyond what it looks like a widening polarization in our society around these basic matters? It's not getting easier to have conversations about these matters. It's getting more difficult and more dangerous.
Yeah, it's a really interesting moment right now because on one hand, it is getting more difficult. I feel like people are just screaming on both sides and not hearing each other. But at the same time, we see with RFK Jr. this rise of interest in chronic diseases too, right? So it's an interesting time, and how we reconcile the two is going to be incredibly challenging. But I think the first thing is that recognizing that trust in public health was deeply fractured during the pandemic, and it's tied to a broader picture of distrust in institutions overall. And we need to acknowledge that many people feel unheard and dismissed and harmed by some policies, rightfully or wrongfully. And in this moment, it's as much about power and narrative control as it is about science. And I think that we can't just keep looking back. It's about where we go from here, and if public health is going to be able to regain its trust. And I think that's an open-ended question right now.
Yes. And, we went through this profound trauma, 1.2 million people dead, millions impacted, still impacted. We had no national commission established. There were efforts to lay the groundwork, but the politics got in the way. Our divisions got in the way. We haven't had an opportunity to reach a resolution in an orderly fashion on this. Instead, we've sort of been left to our own fragmented devices. One thing that it seems today we're facing is a particularly acute moment around vaccines. I mean, vaccines seem to be on the line today in a way that we've not seen in modern times. I mean, the fact that Secretary Kennedy comes forward, there's a renewed study of whether vaccines cause autism, the MMR. There's disruption around the ACIP, the CDC committee, expert committee. There's a postponement there. There's a postponement or cancellation of the VRBAC committee, FDA. It's roiled people into thinking, okay, we may be on the edge at a time when vaccine rates for kindergarten children in the United States for MMR are slipping nationally, and we're seeing outbreaks like measles in Gaines County, Texas, and across in Lee County in New Mexico. We're continuing to struggle with the H5N1. Say a bit about this moment in terms of what it might mean for vaccines.
Yeah, it's been a time coming. And right now, mistrust and distrust in vaccines is mainstream. I mean, our Secretary of Health is flat out saying lies about MMR vaccines, saying it causes deaths when it doesn't. And so I am very concerned. I think it's important to ground ourselves that still 88% of parents believe in childhood vaccinations. That's a lot of people, but we can't let it slip. And how we don't let it slip is the ultimate question. The challenge with vaccines is a larger nemesis of public health is that when it works, it's invisible. And this may be a pessimistic point of view, but I think we honestly just have to move backwards in order to move forwards. And that we're going to see more measles deaths. We're going to see more whooping cough and rubella before people start realizing why we have vaccines, right? There's this general amnesia because vaccines have been so effective. And I think it'll be interesting to see how our society and how our communities and our culture reacts to this.
Well, certainly in the past when we had outbreaks, take measles. I mean, when we had in 2019 the outbreak among the Orthodox Jewish communities in Williamsburg, New York, in Brooklyn, and in Westchester County, or when we had Amish outbreak in Ohio in 2014, and there were outbreaks among Ukrainian lineage folks, folks of Ukrainian background in, I think it was Washington State. Those stirred a reaction politically where people stood up and paid a lot of attention, didn't they?
They did. In fact, the Disney outbreak in California led to the removal of vaccine exemptions for religious reasons in California. And so there was a policy change after these massive outbreaks. I don't foresee that really happening with this one. I think people are waiting to see how it plays out. I am concerned that this outbreak will take a while to contain, and we may lose elimination status if it continues to spread for 12 months straight. And again, how Americans react to that in this moment will be fascinating to watch, honestly, and what comes of it and how parents respond. I think it's a big test right now.
Are you hopeful that the focus on chronic diseases that we're expected to see now under Secretary Kennedy, are you hopeful that might generate some positive returns?
I think so. I mean, I actually agree with some of what RFK Jr. says around the fast food industry and lobbyists. If he's successful, I think that's the big question, particularly with a Republican Congress as well as a White House, because they are typically very pro big business. But I think he has a lot of great ideas. The challenge is, and the ultimate question is, will those good ideas outweigh the damage he's doing with infectious diseases and vaccines? And I'm not too hopeful that the benefits will outweigh the risks, but we're only, like you said, 60 days into this, and we'll see what happens.
How has this experience of the last 5 years changed you, do you think?
Oh my God, it's changed me so much. I feel way more humble. I have learned a lot of hard lessons over the past 5 years and have tried to, again, learn from them. I have become, I guess, an advocate for the need of effective scientific communication, being timely, understandable, and actionable. And I've been scarred. I've been scarred a lot as well. So I'll be honest, I'm not really looking forward to the next 4 years, but this is where we're at and just trying to meet the moment as best as I can.
Katelyn, what is one of your biggest worries?
Something that keeps me up at night is the public health workforce. We have people on the line in local and state health departments and at CDC are just being put through the ringer over and over and over again right now. Very little transparency, a lot of disrespect, honestly. And this is after the last 5 years of COVID, where we were just burned out working 100 hours a week. And my biggest concern is that, sure, we're going to weather this storm over the next 4 years. I mean, we're going to get past it. But if there is no public health workforce to help us there, especially if we're not training in academic institutions, the new cohort, I don't know what the future of public health will look like, because these people are here for the mission with very little pay and really keeping our health and communities alive. And so, yeah, workforce is definitely on the front of my mind.
And those who have the keys to fix this problem, it's mostly we're talking about governors, correct? Governors, mayors, county executives. They're the ones that need to be empowered to act and lead in this area. Is that correct?
That's correct. 80% of local and state health departments' funding comes from CDC. And so if that is cut off or reduced, you're right. I mean, states are going to have to step up, and there's going to be massive variability in that depending on what state you're in. And I don't know if states have the budget to step up in public health and in Medicaid and in emergency response and in all of these other things that are getting cut. They're going to have to make really hard decisions. And not only that, really stepping up and protecting public health and calling out their good work. And I mean, even just a thank you note to your local health department would send a lot of people in tears, because we only hear the bad. And I think that soft support and the hard support is needed more than ever. And you're right, it's on a local and state, but also federal level as well.
Thank you. We ask all of our guests to close by sharing with us what gives you the greatest hope and optimism in this moment.
I mean, ultimately, this moment is an incredible challenge, but I also see it as an opportunity. Yes, the backlash is fierce, but I think it really forces us to rethink how public health connects with people. And, eventually someone's going to have to pick up all these pieces. And my biggest hope is that someone will have a new vision. It's going to have a new version on how to do public health in the 21st century, not in the 19th century like we've been working on. And so I am hopeful for a more effective, efficient, and engaged public health field. I just think it's going to be a bit dark before we get there.
Well, thank you so much, Katelyn. It's just remarkable, your leadership, your commitment, your creativity, your impact. It's quite inspiring. And I just want you to know you have a lot of fans. You have a lot of fans out here. You just have to drop your name and people light up, because the people have really been moved and affected by your work. And that doesn't happen very often.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And now it's a team effort. And so hopefully we figure out a model for make it more sustainable and, again, meet the moment, just like I did with COVID. And we'll see how that turns out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We wish you all the best, and we'll hope to come back and connect again soon. Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Common Health. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and leave a review. To learn more about the CSIS Bipartisan Alliance for Global Health Security or listen to other CSIS podcasts, please visit csis.org.